looks super cool. And so this is why I end up getting into Volkswagens. Now you see a bus in its stock form and it really hits your numbers. Like you see this thing and you're like, wow, that's what I want.
Oh, totally. It was like, yeah, I can drive it anywhere. I can go follow the Grateful Dead, and it's just cool.
Yeah. So now is this in Boise where you find this first bus?
Yes.
And so this first bus that you pick up, this 66, it's all stock. What kind of conditions it in overall, and would you pay for it?
It was, for the time, it was kind of beat up. But by today's standards, it was actually fairly good condition.
Mm-hmm.
But it was missing the rear bumper, and the sunroof assembly was gone, and somebody had built kind of a greenhouse roof over the top, which was just
a greenhouse, huh?
Yeah, which is just like horrible. I mean, it was like made it incredibly hot. That was one of the first things I did, was go out and take that off and buy a sunroof assembly. And
so now when they made it, I'm just curious, when they made the greenhouse roof, like they actually took part of a plastic greenhouse and kind of screwed it to the roof.
Yeah, there's like a wooden frame and like plexiglass, and it's fairly well done for what it was, but what it was awful.
You're not kidding. And so you get this bus, it's not complete, it's not obviously not restored, and you start to go. How long do you drive it before you decide, like, I'm going to restore this dude and get her where she needs to be?
I drove it for about a year, and I bought the thing for $800.
$800 for a 21 window.
Yeah, which was like huge money for a bus.
Yeah.
Especially in that condition at that time. Bay windows were worth more than split window buses in the early 90s. Because they were newer and nicer,
And then you get this bus, you cruise it for about a year, and then you decide you're going to start restoring it, because I don't even know if there wasn't a lot of aftermarket or restoration bus parts available back then, were there?
There was actually quite a bit of stuff. Like, I got a catalog. Vintage Parts was the part supplier at the time. And actually in the catalog, there was quite a few NOS parts that were available. And
yeah, that's right. There were a lot. I personally remember going like the 89 Jamboree in the 90s, and you'd see like NOS bus metal, especially like single cab corners and stuff like that. And they were like, that's crazy. Those are $400 or $300. It was like, but there was seemed to be a lot of NOS bus stuff back in the day.
Yeah, it was weird. Stuff was more available. Like literally every junkyard I went to had a split window bus in it. And there were lots of them that were out behind just general auto shops that were being used as sheds and stuff.
And so with this bus, as you start to do the restoration, like, what gets you going down the path, like where you get so into, because sometimes people are just into, like, you see somebody that they have a 66 bus and all they care about is a 66 bus. They're really not into earlier models or different models. What started triggering you down that road where you started really seeking out, like you realized your bus, and then you realized getting your bus back to your original, and then started to go down the path of like early buses? Or were you just content with your 66 at the time?
Well, I'm kind of a collector, and so like immediately when I got it, I started noticing other ones, and I'm noticing like every bus around town that I can find. And a guy that I worked with told me about an auto shop that was a couple towns over. And literally the first time I go out there to go parts hunting to get parts for my bus, I find a 55 barn door panel and then buy it for $300.
Really?
And to this day, that's the only barn door that I've ever found out in the field. It was like the first time I go hunting, and that's it. You know.
And so now you're 66, you drag home this barn door, and how are you getting information on the buses? I mean, is there plenty of information out there, or it's like Soto time and Octo time and getting the newsletters and stuff like that? Because even the magazines, they really wouldn't go deep into bus details. You know what I mean? On a lot of the Hot VWs and VW trends.
Yeah, I'd get Hot VWs, and the first thing I'd always open up and go straight to the transporter talk column, because I want to know about buses.
And was it Jeff Walters was doing it then, or who was doing
it? Dave Hurd was doing it.
Dave Hurd. Yeah.
And then I immediately joined Soto because that was it for bus clubs at that point. And then I went to the library and looked at, they had some automotive books.
Right.
And one of the books there had a picture of a really early bus, a no rear window bus, a 50 or early 51.
Sure.
I looked at it, I was like, this is just so different. And years later, I went back to the library to try and find that book and look at it again, and the book was gone.
So they were like, Lynn Bjornson checked it out in '92 and never brought it back. You went and looked on your shelf.
Have it.
Yeah. So as you're getting into your hobby and you start to collect information, how bad does it get? I mean, obviously, we're talking right now and you're in your office and there's literally a library of VW content that's in there. What's the first thing that you start to see? I mean, you get the barn door. Do you realize how rare the barn door is when you get it, or it's just a bus at this time to you?
I knew what it was, and I start looking around and trying to find information, trying to get it going. And at this point, I kind of realize I'm like way over my head because I have just the most basic knowledge on these. Sure. And the barn door had been off the road for a decade at that point. And so then I find another bus in the newspaper in Boise. And this is like a year later. This is 1993. And it's a Mango bus that a local guy had a mechanic rebuild it mechanically, and he really did a good job on a nice original car. And then the guy went up to college with the bus and met the girl of his dreams, and then goes and asks the girl's dad if he can marry her. And the dad says, if you want to marry my daughter, you've got to get rid of the VW bus.
Really?
Yeah. So he puts it up for sale, and I buy it for $2,500.
And this is a restored bus?
It's a mechanically restored bus, but it's original paint.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a nice car. And so I get that, and it's a mile above the 21 window and the barn door. And so I sell both of those buses and then just keep the Mango bus at that point.
So now you've got the Mango, and that's what year's the Mango?
It's a 61.
A 61 Mango. And now, I mean, when you've got the barn door and you've got the 66, just looking at the barn door, everything's so different on a barn door. Like, I mean, from the suspension to the trans and all that stuff. As you're seeing that and you're selling the barn door, do you get any, like, because it's so rare? I mean, you're still to today's standard, I'm sure you undersold it, but did you start to know the values of them, or did they go to other bus people in the bus scene?
Yeah, I ended up selling the barn door to Dave Hurd.
Oh, okay.
And then the 21 window I sold locally to a guy, and I I sold it for like $1,400. So I made, a decent amount of money, like $600 on it. And that was after I had driven it for a year.
And so now you've got the Mango 61, and I'm assuming it's just a standard combi.
Oh, it's a standard microbus.
Okay. And did you have any? And so that's one of the things. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. What are some of the popular misconceptions that people, some of the terminology that people misuse? Like I called it a combi, which a combi would be stripped interior, no seats.
So yeah, that's the basic models. You have your panel van with no windows at all, and then a combi. A lot of people describe it as a panel van with windows. Mm-hmm. It's got a single tone paint job. Most combis delivered to the U.S. had full seating, the middle and rear seat, but that's it. They don't have any headliner, no interior panels other than in the cab. And then the standard microbus, which was what the Mango is, it's still an 11 window like a combi. It has a two-tone paint job, has a headliner, full interior, floor mat in the back. It's just a little nicer of a bus.
Now, so bringing that up, would combis be more rare than like I'm wanting to call it deluxe, but it's not a deluxe. It's a I don't know. I'm having brain fade right now. What do we just call
standard?
It? Yeah, it's a standard, but it's not really called a standard though, right? I mean, it's a microbus.
Well,
and where does the name microbus come in? Is that from Volkswagen, or is that what people are calling it?
Yeah, Volkswagen originally called it a microbus.
Mm-hmm.
And when they introduced it in 1950, it was the top of the line bus. Then in 51, they introduced the deluxe microbus with the 23 windows, and so then the other microbus just became the standard microbus.
Right. Okay. So as far as production wise, would it be more rare? It would be more rare to find a combi essentially than it would be to find a standard microbus. Would you think?
Yeah, I would say there's easily twice as many standard microbuses as combis.
Yeah, because more combis were maybe more utilitarian, right? Like bought for people that maybe use it for business, but also might have needed to move people too.
Yeah, they actually advertised them as that, like in the sales brochure. One that I just got recently, it has a fold over page, so when you look at the page, there's a workman, getting some stuff out of it. Then you fold open the page, and then there's his wife and kids with getting in the middle seat.
Mm-hmm. And so back to some of the terminology that's commonly misused around in the general VW population. So combi, to refer to your bus as a combi, is not really accurate if it's not really a combi. The microbus is more the 11 window buses that were interior finished buses. And then the deluxe. Now, where does the Samba come in at?
Samba is just another term for a deluxe.
Was it a European term?
Yeah. And we haven't been able to really pin down what it's a reference to, but it seems to have come from Germany, and that's just they called and that's for a full window bus.
23 window Samba.
Yeah, 23 or 21, because there's also deluxes with the hard top that are either the 15 or the 13 window.
Yeah, and I have a 13 window, which sacrilegiously I just swapped the roof out on it. My brother was like, "I can't believe you did that," and I said, "Well, I always wanted a 21 window, and why remake mine now that they make the reproduction roof so nice, And so the Bull Run bus is now will future be a 21 window. So it's in theory still a deluxe, and I just decided to put the sunroof option on it myself.
It's just a little more deluxe now.
That's right. That's right. Now I wonder, in regards to production numbers and scarcity and rarity, what is the hierarchy in regards to, like, because I'm sure there's differences because of the popularity of the bus between early and late models, right? And we're going to say early and late is going to be like 63 and later. They go to the 64. They go to the big back window, right? 64.
Yeah. 64 model year is when they went to the large hatch. And
so I mean, technically, let's say just in the splits alone, some bus aficionados might say there's 3 or 4 levels of buses, right? You've got your barn doors, and then you've got after your barn doors, you have you have the Wolfsburg and the Hanover buses, right?
Yeah. So barn doors and up to early 56 were all built in Wolfsburg, and
right.
they built in the Beetle factory.
Right.
And then in mid 56, they went to the bus factory. And so the kind of generation wise, the barn doors are the first generation and body style. Then the difference between a Wolfsburg and an early Hanover bus is just full on nerd stuff. I mean, you have to really be getting in the weeds to tell the difference.
Right.
Most people looking at the outside would not be able to tell at all. So the early post barn doors all the way up through 58 look essentially the same. Of course, some people might get after me because the bubble tail lights
right
versus dollar tail lights, but really they all look pretty much the same. Then 59 through 61 still have the early tail lights and turn signals, but they have a new batch of colors and some bigger bumpers. Then 62 and 3, the turn signals get even bigger, and then 64 through 7, the whole body
tail
style
lights.
changes.
Yeah. So, and what's funny is there's so many different intricacies. Let's say, for example, which drives a lot of my listeners a little crazy because I always bring up one of my cars. But I have in my 67 bus, it's a late 67 that has a mid-year cargo door handle. It's got I think it's the L cargo door handle. So it's like this $400 freaking cargo door handle that, is super expensive because it's only for like 6 months or something crazy like that. But it's funny how as a hobby, we look at the hobby and split it up into so many sub segments. And I think it's one of those, it reminds me of like land speed racing, right? Like everybody goes land speed racing. And one guy says, well, I'm the first Volkswagen with an antenna that ran that fast, or I'm the first Volkswagen. Like everybody wants to have their own individuality in this ocean of things that to the general public all look the same, But I think it's always unique, and it's interesting that, as much as the cars get safer, the enthusiasts like them less. So the bigger the windows got, the bigger the taillights got. Everybody was like, oh yeah, that's more new style stuff. But I always find it really interesting how we seek like the early ones, the earlier, the better, and then what can differentiate our panel bus from someone else's, or our, microbus from someone else's. And I mean, even get to the point where people are like, well, here's my palm green, sand green, and that's such like an inside click, terminology, which is just, it's kind of humorous to me. But let's talk about that for a second. Like palm green, sand green. Why do people get so excited over a palm green, sand green versus, you know what I mean? Like I don't get the differentiation on the paint colors. Like what is so exciting about that versus something else? I don't know. And I'm coming to you because I'm a late model guy. I'm a 67 guy. So
yeah, well, like say a palm green, sand green, you're talking a 55 through 58
mm-hmm.
for the most part. So
Right.
it's going to be a press bumper, standard microbus for the most part. There's also palm green, sand green Westphalias.
Oh, they did two-tone. So with that now, Westphalias were typically made out of panels, right?
No, they were uh, primarily built out of combis, although pretty much every model except for trucks have been converted into Westphalias at the Westphalia factory.
And so, touching on Westphalias a little bit, in the early production, was Westphalia an option where you would buy it through Westphalia or you buy it through Volkswagen and then send it to Westphalia?
From day one for Westphalia campers, the first one, a British Army officer took an early barn door there and had them outfit it with camping equipment. And shortly thereafter, they started doing conversions for Volkswagen.
Mhm.
And really early on, they were promoting the hell out of them. There's a couple early models that were obviously promotional vehicles, in conjunction with VW, and then from there all the way through production, they were the factory camper. They're a coach builder, which is an outside company that does body work and conversion work, but they were sold through the dealer network. But also anybody could take their bus to Westphalia, and they were happy to convert it privately for people.
Now, did Westphalia keep track of buses and VIN numbers and stuff like that, or who kept track of that database, or does that make part of the mystery really hard?
No, they did not keep any records. And when I toured the Westphalia factory in 2003, there was nobody working there who had been there for more than 20 years.
Oh, interesting. So, and Westphalia still to this day outfits all kinds of vehicles, not just Volkswagens, but they do other stuff, or it's just primarily Volkswagens?
Uh, they're actually owned by Mercedes now, and
Mm-hmm.
so they do all kinds of cars that aren't Volkswagens.
So, but their whole angle is like camping, outfitting, whatever it's going to be. So, in theory, somebody could really fake an early Westphalia if they wanted to. Like if somebody's plot was sinister to try to get a lot of money, it's difficult to prove unless you've got some documentation. And if you're going back that early, unless you've got a receipt from Wolfsburg, or not from Wolfsburg, but from Westphalia, I mean, it's going to be suspect that it's early, because I think the early ones, they're quite rare on the early
Yeah,
Westphalias.
the early ones are fairly rare, or fairly uncommon, I should say, and certain slices of them are rare, depending, because the word rare is very overused.
Yeah, it
Uh,
is.
and everybody has a different definition of what rare is.
Yeah.
Uh, but generally, it's pretty hard to fake one. In the early years, production wise, if you get the birth certificate on it, there are certain things and certain ways that they were ordered. And then at when you go up further, there are just definite things that the way they were ordered, the M codes on them, you can tell that they were original Westphalias.
So now, touching back on some of the microbus paint combos, because we talked about palm green, sand green, that everybody that owns one apparently is super proud of them. What other colors did the microbuses come in those same years? What color options were there? And is palm green, sand green that rare? Because it seems like there's a ton of them out there.
They're not rare, but there are rare ones. If you want to get into the weeds and get
Yeah, just out of curiosity, what would make, well, what were the paint I mean, for deluxes, how many paint, or microbuses, how many different paint options did they have in that era? From, what did you say, it was 50, 55 to 57?
yeah, mid 55 through 58 model year, palm green sand green was the standard color if you were getting a standard.
Mhm.
That was it. Unless you ordered special paint, then you could get a different color. But those are really rare, like
Oh,
exceeding.
really? So 57 or mid 55 to 58, those buses that are actual standard buses are palm green, sand green for the most part. And if you've got a factory color different than that, it's a rare bird.
Yeah, I can count on one hand the 55 through 58 standard microbuses that are not palm green, sand green, and have fingers left over.
And what were the colors that were optioned at the time? Was it a paint to choice, or was it was specific colors that they had available?
Theoretically, they would paint it any color you want, but the ones that I've seen are either postal yellow or fire truck red.
Oh, really? And
Yeah,
they're passenger buses. They're
yeah,
microbuses, huh? Wow, that's
yeah.
interesting.
And then the interesting thing on those, like a palm green, sand green bus has a two-tone green interior, and the seats are a single-tone green. But then on those special paint ones, the interior is two-tone brown with brown seats like you would see in a deluxe bus from that time period.
So there wasn't a lot. Really, it was like we offer the bus. It's this bus, this color. That was kind of the dealership's thing. Like, yeah, we've got 4 of these. You can buy them if you like them, and this is kind of the way they are, right? I mean, they came mostly that way unless you special ordered
Yeah, exactly. But then there's, and that's up through mid 1961. Then in mid 61, they introduced a couple more colors.
it. Mm-hmm.
And then there were three color choices at that point.
And in
It,
61, what are the color choices?
so well, in 59 they went to mango green and seagull gray,
Mm-hmm.
and palm green sand green was not available as a standard color at that point. But then just to throw an extra weird thing in, a bus popped up a couple of years ago that's a 1962 that's palm green sand green, original paint. It's got the special paint code on the M code plate. It's absolutely, factory palm green sand green.
Really?
Yeah. and
So,
and then also there's some palm green sand green Westphalias from 61 too. But for those ones, they reversed the colors and they put the dark color on the bottom and the light color on top.
which
But
is what they started doing in the later 60s. Now,
yeah, in 59 was when they went to mango green and seagull gray in 59, and then through mid 61 that was your one color choice.
mm-hmm.
Then in mid 61 they started with mouse gray with pearl white on top, or turquoise green with blue white on top. In and and then also they got rid of mango and seagull at that point, and then they also had sealing wax red with beige gray on top.
I think I like the sealing wax red with the beige gray on the top. I'm a fan of that. Now, when it comes to the early deluxes, the early 23 windows, all the ones that I see. So I'm assuming there was one paint color, which was sealing wax and chestnut. Is that correct? Or were there options to the others?
So yeah, through 19 from 51 through 58, it
Mm-hmm.
was chestnut and sealing wax. Although in 51, they made a few hundred deluxes in 51, and those ones had a white roof, but it was still the
Really?
chestnut and sealing wax.
And like a separate white, like at the rain gutter, the roof itself is white.
Yes.
Wow, so like a 3-tone, huh?
Yeah.
And how many of those exist today?
There's a handful of them on.
I mean, that's gonna be a super rare find because you're obviously it's a 51, you said?
Yeah, and that's like for the barn door nuts, that's the absolute top of the world, is a 51 deluxe.
That's incredible. And I didn't even know this because I just knew that, and for me, it's just from going, because I'm more of a custom guy. I appreciate the stock stuff. And I remember, you know, I can appreciate it. I just look at it and go, man, it needs to be lowered a little bit, and it needs a big giant motor in the back because with my buddy, we were up in Northern California and we were cruising around for the Sacramento Bug-A-Rama weekend a few years ago, and my buddy Eric Heinrich he's got a 53 barn door, the Jesse James old barn door, and we were driving around, and I was in my bus, and it was like painful to try to wait for him on the freeway. It was just so brutal with that 25. I think, they have 25 horse motor in those things.
It's a 54. You're talking about his deluxe bus, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's a 54, and those had 36 horse in them. By 54.
But yeah, I mean, it's like those things. I mean, top speed on that bus is what, 50, 55 miles an hour?
Pretty much. They are slow as hell.
Yeah, I mean, I have a split window also, and I drove my split window when it was stock. I got it from Michigan. It was like a bad restoration. It was imported here in '79, and it was from Michigan. So I learned in that purchase, never ask a guy from Michigan how much rust is on it, because they don't have the same level of acceptable rust as we do in Las Vegas. And I was driving it to a car meet one night, and I thought, I'll take the split window. And it was like painful because it had the split case trans, so the transmission was super loud. And then I remember downshifting to get onto the freeway because it's 25 horse, and I was dying. I was like, how do people drive these things back then? So I love the look. I just the slow the slow performance. But I guess it's just where you're at, right? Like if you enjoy the simplicity of it, it's kind of nice just to be in it and just putt along and kind of time capsule the thing,
Yeah, for me, it's, I appreciate different cars at different levels. Like I had a 57 Palm Green Sand Green Standard that I drove all the way across the country, totally stock with a 36 horse engine. And it is great. But then, these days.
You had to clear your schedule for a month.
Yeah.
I mean, how many miles a day are you getting in that thing? I mean, if you're averaging like 50, 55 miles an hour, if you're lucky, you're I mean, a 8-hour day, you're going to get, not a bunch of mileage out of the thing, right?
Oh yeah, it took a long time, and especially because we didn't drive like straight across the country. We were going up and down and back and forth, and
now was this one restored? So it was stock restored or original?
It was all original.
And how did it fare on the long road trip as far as repairs and reliability and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, it ran great. Nothing broke down on the whole trip.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. It's impressive, but it's not, right? Because VW is known for their reliability, like sewing machine reliability. They just run forever. I mean, they're incredible from their reliability, but I think what happens is you take it to that oddball mechanic who just doesn't do one simple thing right, and it all starts to unravel from there.
Yeah, and part of it's you got to feel your car, and you make it work right to begin with, and then if something isn't going right, then you pay attention to it, and you come to a hill, and you're going to go into third gear on that hill in any kind of stock bus. So it's like, do you want to go into third gear on your terms or its terms?
Right.
And the difference is a couple hundred yards, but if you just want to mash it down and ride it like you're whipping a donkey, then it's probably going to fail you at some. If you just go easy with it and drop it into third and putt up the hill, you'll be fine.
So getting back into some of the buses, in regards to, so we have, what we're talking about, we're talking about like 4 levels of buses, right? Like barn doors, and then early buses up to 57, 57, 58. And then from 58 to 63 or 64, or 63 and then 64 and up, or was it 58 to 62?
59 through 63 are like small hatch, with the later bumpers on, and you can slice it up a little more, but they're fairly similar in that time period, and color wise also.
Now, since I've got the expert here, I'm going to start asking some of these questions. So, in respect to options, did VW keep track of options, or you can only get that through your birth certificate?
So in early 59, they started putting the M code plate on buses, and that's behind the front seat on the passenger side, and that has some options stamped into it. And when I first started getting into buses in the early 90s, like I'm finding these plates, and it has some numbers. I'm trying to figure out what it is, and there's nothing that published saying, you can decode this way. But we were able to figure out just by deduction what a bunch of it was. Like, there's in the lower right hand corner, there's the VIN number, right, and then there's
country of origin, and the
port of, a couple letters. Most of them in any given area were going to be the same. Like in my area, P would be the letters, and the U, that's the United States, and the P was Portland, which was Riviera Motors, and that's the distributor number. And the model number, we knew what model numbers were. There's other 3-digit codes, and so we got to start figuring out what they are. And I got a notebook, and I started writing them all down and comparing. This car has, this model has these options, and we'd figure them out actually by process of elimination for some of them. Some of them we had to figure out later by other means.
Yeah, because by the time I got my bus, I think I owned a couple of buses before. In '96, I owned a double cab. 93, I owned a 11 window, and then I got out of the scene for a little bit. When I got back in is when I bought my 13 window deluxe, and I picked that one up. I found the craziest part is I found it in Goldfield, Nevada, and the tags had expired on it in 1976. So by the time it got parked in the desert, it was 11 years old. You know what I mean? Or 9 years old? Yeah. So it's like it's parked in the desert. I'm sure they pillaged the motor out of it for a dune buggy or something, and it was 95% complete, original paint, fairly straight, no rust, and I bought it for $100. So I remember finding it when I found it in '92, and I was just, it was a dream for me back. Like, man, if I only had a way to bring that thing back from 150 miles from Las Vegas. And then later I bought it in 2000 when I was driving through there with my wife, and I wanted to get the bus. But when you find some of these things in there, it's interesting because these things all have these crazy stories where they're purchased for a family, and then somehow they end up in the middle of Goldfield, Nevada, getting pillaged for an engine, or possibly maybe broken down on a road trip through there. But there's so much uniqueness about each bus's individual path. What are some of the most interesting things or places that you've come upon a bus where it's like, hey, here's this great bus that should have been used for this, but it ended up over here in this obscure place, just in hiding forever? Any unique stories that you have like that in respect to some of the unique finds or buses that you've ended up with?
As far as like weird uses for them, it seems like they just became sheds.
Right.
They would die, and and then people would just store stuff in them, and there's I've heard so many stories from people over the years, like probably a dozen people have told me stories of they got a bus, but they had to buy the person a shed and assemble the shed to get the bus,
Yeah.
and then move all the person's stuff into the shed,
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's because they're so bulky and have so much room inside. But my it's always here in Vegas, especially because of Bajas and dune buggies and all that kind of stuff. When we'd find the one trip that I took in '96, or I'm sorry, in '92, when I drove from Vegas to Reno to go look at a double cab in Reno with a buddy of mine. I was passenger in his car, and I found in that one trip, I found my 13 window deluxe, which was the velvet green and white. I found in Schurz, Nevada, right at the intersection. If you're coming down to Las Vegas, there's an intersection where Schurz, Nevada, right there, there's like a V in the road, right? At the corner of that intersection, at the very end, parked facing outward, was a 13 window deluxe Lotus White over Lotus White that my buddy, after I got my bus, he wanted a bus. So I said, here's the phone number for this farmer that I stopped and talked to. He wants $400 for that bus. So my buddy went back, got that bus. But there was so many of these, and especially deluxes, I was shocked because in the early 90s, like deluxes were super rare, especially to find them used in somebody's yards and like that. You'd find a lot of the standard microbuses and stuff like that. But deluxes seemed to be so rare back then. And now as we continue to go into the hobby, it's like everything just keeps getting more deluxes and more super rare stuff just keeps coming to surface. I think that that's the exciting thing I think about the hobby, is because once we get into it, we can go down so many different levels with the different vehicles that you can find with the different obscure parts. Now, question to you is, what are some of the more common things that people believe are really unique, but they're really not that unique? One of the things that's typical where, everybody thinks this is a super rare option, but it really wasn't that rare of an option.
Well, the double doors on panel vans, I've had plenty of people think that that's the rarest thing ever, but they're, like maybe 10-20% of panel vans were double doors.
Double cargos, to load from both sides.
Yeah, and then I have people just think that buses are rare in general, and they're not. They're actually very common cars. I mean, they sold a lot of them.
What was the biggest production year for buses?
For
the split buses,
I'd have to look, but I think 67 was the most produced, but I'd have to get in the numbers or get in the books and look on that.
And then in respect to buses, trucks, like let's get into like the commercial vehicles a little bit, right? So obviously the earliest ones are going to be single cabs, and then double cabs. You have your Benz double cabs, which were made 57, 58, or just 58?
Pretty much just 58. There was an earlier one that was either a prototype or a customer conversion. There's several pictures of a barn door Benz, but it does not exist, or is not known to exist anyway.
No one's been able to track it down.
No, and nobody's faked one yet, but it'll happen sooner or later.
Right. I mean, that'd be kind of cool, like a barn door Benz, right? I mean, it'd just be something cool to look at if somebody did a really accurate job of it.
Oh yeah, and it's just a matter of time. I'm looking forward to it. I predict here in the next few years we're going to see one.
Now, in respect to like some of the unique options in the, let's just say the mid years, right? From like 56 to 63. We're just going to group them all together. How rare is the sunroof option, no skylights, just the sunroof option on a regular microbus?
That's pretty uncommon. They're out there, but it's I would say 1% or something. You just don't see that many of them.
Yeah, because you had to not want, and maybe it's a guy who owned a 2300 before. He didn't like getting sunburned from the windows, but he liked the rag top. Maybe. I mean, who knows what you would go through to option that? Because I almost wonder, has anybody tracked on a price book of what the options cost?
Oh yeah, there's plenty of price lists, and it was a couple $100 for the sunroof.
What was the difference for the deluxe? Like from the microbus to the deluxe, what was the price difference?
Let's see. I actually have some price lists around here somewhere.
Well, yeah, it's
like a microbus would be like $2,200-$2,300. A deluxe would be about $3,000, I think.
Oh, so about $800 more for a deluxe.
Yeah, I think I should find the actual price list, or probably quote.
That's all right. I'm not going to hold it to you. We're just having some bus talk. No need to get too serious about it. Now, what are you currently in your collection? You have your bus, which was featured in Hot VWs magazine not long ago, and it's the SüFunk bus.
SüFunk, yeah.
SüFunk. Now, tell me the story of the SüFunk bus. What is the story behind that bus?
So, it has a pretty good story, and I've tracked it down basically from day one. Originally, it was, as far as I can tell, it was purchased by the SüFunk company, which is a radio manufacturer in Stuttgart, Germany, that made radios like this.
Yeah, the picnic radio, huh?
Yeah. And bought this little unit off of eBay.
You found that on eBay?
Yeah.
Did they know what it was when they were? I mean, obviously, whoever sold it knew what it was.
Yeah, it's just a not particularly valuable radio.
Really?
Yeah. Some of their radios that look cooler are actually valuable, but that one's not. It was $40 or something.
Get out of here! What year is that radio? What year is that picnic radio you got?
About 65 or so.
Wow, that's nuts. So SüFunk was around for quite a while.
Yeah. They were manufacturing radios under their name up through the 60s, and then they were manufacturing them that were tagged with other people's names for a few years after that, and they got bought out by another company. But anyway, as far as the bus goes with that radio, or with the bus, they in 1964 they sold the bus. And
no, what year is the bus? Let's start off. What year is it?
Okay, so the bus is in 1950, which is the first year that they built buses
for production retail sale.
Yeah, and it's a late 50. It is built in November, but the production started pretty slow, and they really didn't get going in real number production wise till the summer of 50. So anyway, it's chassis number 5909, and they built about 8,000 buses in 50. So production wise, it's about 3/4 of the way through.
Right.
And so then in 1964, there was a Porsche dealer from Manhattan Beach, California, who's also a racer by the name of Vasek Polak. And he is a Czechoslovakian guy who moved over after the war and worked for Max Hoffman in New York. And of course, Max Hoffman was the original importer of VWs to the United States. And so Vashik saved up his money working for Max and bought himself a 550 Spider, and then took his bus and loaded it up with everything, moved out from New York to California, and opened the first standalone Porsche dealership in the United States.
Yeah, because I know Vasek Pollock is a super popular in the Porsche world.
Oh yeah, he was the tuner for 550s and Carrera engines. Like, when the factory would send their race team to California, they would have him tune their cars.
Wow. So that guy, so that guy knew what he was doing, and that's the first I've heard of the connection to Max Hoffman. You know, I think that's it's pretty interesting how that comes back to that and how everything begets. You know, so he bought that bus. He bought your bus, the SüFunk Bus.
So yeah, Vashik would go to Stuttgart every summer in the 60s and visit the Porsche family, visit the Porsche factory, buy some piece of crap bus and fill it full of parts that he'd buy from the factory and engines and stuff. And so in 64, he bought a 6-cylinder engine, which was quite new for Porsche at that point, and then a couple 4-cam Carrera engines, and put them all on the bus, and then filled it to the roof with race parts. Nice. And then shipped it back to his dealership in Manhattan Beach. And you know, he just bought it because it was the cheapest bus that he could find, and it was a shipping container to him.
So did he buy a private? He bought a private party.
Yeah. So he bought it either from SüFunk company or maybe from a junkyard or something. At the time he bought it, it was running with its original engine.
Really?
Yeah, the 25 horse, which I can only imagine a 25 horse engine, and it's loaded with a ton, literally a ton of stuff. It had to be slow.
But the early buses were technically rated as a three-quarter ton bus, like the suspension.
Yeah, it could handle the weight. It just wasn't going to go fast or uphill.
Yeah, that's for sure. So he buys it, brings it. So he ships it back to the States in what year? In 64, he said?
Yeah, in 64.
And then what happens to it then?
So then this was really interesting. After we got it running and took it down to Octo, people started reaching out to me because they saw pictures of it on the internet and stuff. And I found the guy who had unloaded it at Vashik's dealership.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Is a guy by the name of Ralph Jackson, and really interesting guy. When he was in high school, he would walk by Vashik's dealership and was looking at the cars through the fence and stuff. And Vashik came out and talked to him, and he could see that he was interested, and offered him a job. And he's like, "Well, what will I be doing?" Vashik's like, "Whatever I tell you to do."
Nice.
And one of the things that he told him to do was to unload all the stuff out of this bus that he had just brought from Germany. And so Ralph unloads all the stuff, and then asks Vashik what he's going to do with the bus. And Vashik's like, "I'm just going to scrap it out." And Ralph's like, "Well, sell it to me instead." And Vashik's like, "Okay, $50." And he sold it to him for $50 and took it out of his paycheck.
Wow. And so how long does Ralph own it for? Ralph, you said his name is?
Yeah. Ralph had it for a couple of years, and he was in high school at the time. And by the time Ralph graduated from high school, he had owned 4 356s.
Get out of here.
Yeah, he was into them. And him and his family just used it as an extra car, as a grocery getter and stuff. And so then he sold it to a mechanic who had a shop there in LA. And then he sold it to another guy, and that was both in the 60s. So around 69 or so, a guy by the name of Ed Fengler bought it, and he kept it through 1999. And
really? And so he was an enthusiast that bought it? Like he knew what it was when he bought it?
Yeah, he knew that it was an old bus, and that it was one of the oldest ones, and he recognized that it was, just super old, and he worked for a number of auto shops, VW shops, and he would actually drive it to Pomona and to the swap meet and
really
buy and sell parts and stuff. And in the 70s and 80s, and then in the 90s, he ended up selling it to Dick Christensen from Arizona, and
right.
And Dick was really ahead of the game, and he's owned so many early cars and recognized, early stuff early on, and he just parked it at his place in Arizona until from 99 until 2012, when the big barn door gathering happened at Octo, and he got it on the road for that, and they drove it around that weekend, and then sold it to Gene Langen in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And then a year and a half ago or so, Gene Langen decided to thin out his collection a little bit, and it popped up on the internet, and I just had to make a move and buy it.
And now what's interesting is no one ever restored the bus.
No, it is the oldest known original paint bus.
And so in 1950, that's one in regards to age of that bus that's in existence today. I mean, I guess when you get to the 50s, there's a couple dozen or less than that, or I don't know how many are out there that are known to be out there.
On the registry, there's like 42 1950 buses.
That's a lot of buses.
Out of 8,000.
Well, I mean, in perspective to the fact of, essentially a VW back then was like a Yugo. It was seen as like your economy, disposable, like it would be like you're starting your business, you buy the VW, and then your business gets bigger, you get the Chevrolet 2.5 ton pickup with, you know what I mean, like all that kind of stuff, and you've outgrown the bus. You know what I mean? I mean, at least that's my perspective, because the buses that I've owned, I bought 2 buses. One of them was it was an FTD panel. It was a walkthrough, 57, I think it was. And it was on the Samba a few years back, and there was a little bit of controversy because I had a whole thing with a friend of mine about it. But I bought that one, and I bought a 56 panel. That was both these buses I bought for $5,000. And I think this is probably like 2008, maybe 2007. And the 56 bus that I got had been creamed on the side. But other than that, the motor looked perfect and brand new and all that kind of stuff. And I think what would happen is you'd get in a bad enough accident, people would just pitch these cars to the side. So in perspective to like the disposability of the Volkswagen, I think, You know what I mean? Like like to some people, it seemed almost like a throwaway vehicle. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
oh, oh yeah, and that's what it was. I mean, it was Vashik was ready to throw it away. I mean, this was a running driving bus in 1964, and he was just going to scrap it out because it was
and what
worthless even here.
Yeah, and what's well, of course, by then because the technology was so old. I mean, you're talking it's 14 years old, and they're like, let's just junk this thing, man. It's the new ones are so much better. This thing's antiquated. It's like it's the real old model. But what I find amazing is that nobody ever tried. Like it just got used at SüFunk, and then imported to the States, and then no one ever bothered like showing it any love, which is in hindsight is a great thing, right? Because it still retains its originality versus being painted with house paint or whatever that we've seen done to these buses. I mean, I think it's pretty amazing. And now obviously with it being the oldest original bus. So that's like the oldest still original bus.
Yeah, it's amazing. It basically dodged bullets its entire life to be where it is.
Yeah, I think your personalized plate should be lucky. It's amazing how much, I mean, how many hands it went through, and no one, did they cut the fender wells out or any of that stuff?
No, at some point early in its life, uh, sometime after 1955, but well before 64, it got in a wreck and the nose skin was replaced and the driver's door was replaced.
Right.
Uh, and and then also the deck lid got replaced at some point. We're not sure when, but it's not a 50 deck lid, but it is original paint. But other than that, there really wasn't a lot of hacking going on it, and it like so many other buses, it stayed original paint because it was never worth putting a paint job on.
And so you get this bus, and then now it's in your hands. You're Mr. Original guy, keep it stock kind of guy. And then what's the first thing you do to this bus?
So I get it, and I wanted to do something a little different, and as kind of a nod to Vashik Pollock, I decided to go with a Porsche theme. And my friend Adam Bruno up in Spokane, Washington, put a Porsche 356 motor into his Mango bus a few years back, and he is kind of pushing me to put a 356 motor in a bus for a while. And I was like, oh well, those are kind of expensive and,
Sure.
and stuff, but it's like this was really the one. And
Yeah.
I decided to go out and I really wanted to drive the bus. And while I do like, stock stuff, and I'm not afraid to drive a 36 horse bus across the country. I really wanted to do something a little different. So it is really a departure for me because every other bus that I've had, I built myself, and I do the mechanical work on. But this one, I was like, I'm just gonna have Adam do it. So I just towed it up to his place, and it was a running driving bus when I got it. But I drove it off the transport, then onto my trailer, and then off of my trailer.
Yeah.
It's like 50 yards was all I drove it in the stock form. And it had a 36 horse engine. The original engine was long gone. And so I kind of came up with the recipe of how I wanted it suspension wise. And I have a lot of experience driving a bus. And so I know what in general stock form is going to make it perform. And so the barn door springs up front are stiffer than later bus, and I wanted to have a softer ride. So I wanted later bus springs up front. Then transmission wise, I wanted a tunnel type transmission. But so I had a 63 bus tranny that had been rebuilt laying around. And then engine wise, of course the 356, and then also 356 brakes on it too. And so I took the bus, and it's just loaded with parts, and dumped it off on Adam, and then continued to buy more parts and get them shipped to his place. Right. And it was just kind of a off in the future project. I wanted to get everything before the project got going. And sure. so then a few weeks before Octo, people knew that I had the bus and stuff, and a friend of mine sends me a text, and he asks if I'm taking the bus to Octo, and yeah, we really haven't done anything with it yet, and I call up Adam. I was like, can you do it? And it's like Octo's like 2 weeks off at this point, right. And Adam's like, yeah, I can do it. And so he works for like 12 days straight, like just full days, right. And just knocks it out. And like about 4 days before Octo, somebody else texts me and asks if it's going to Octo, and then I didn't lie, but I'm like, the bus, the front end's out of it, the transmission's out of it, it's completely disassembled right now, right. And then Adam whips it all together, because of course it was ready for assembly at that point. Sure. And gets it running, and takes it on a couple mile test drive, and it works, and he bombs down to Boise and picks me up, and we drive it down to Octo.
Oh wow, you guys even road tripped it, right? No prep road trip, just right out the door, huh?
Oh yeah, it was put it all together and take it on a road trip.
So that's got to be a great feeling, especially to come out there. And then you come out there with one of the oldest buses that's out there, right? I mean, it's you're not going to see a lot of 50s at Octo.
The 50s do occasionally show up at Octo, but they don't drive there. In fact, this is the only 50 bus that anybody drives. Other
really?
Other ones run, but they run on and off of trailers. They don't like drive on the road. And so like in the last year, I've driven the bus like 6,500 miles, which is further than I think every other 50 on the planet has driven over the last decade combined.
Well, but that's what they're for, though. I mean, like, what's the point in owning it if you're not going to get at least a couple of your own memories behind the wheel, right?
If you have a toy, you should play with it. Right. Have fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no question. I mean, I think, especially if you're able to, I mean, I always wonder, like, people that finally get to the point of like the pinnacle of their hobby, and they cherish something so much they don't even enjoy it. It almost becomes like, the closest thing that I have to that is a low mileage original Mexican Beetle that I had, and I had it, and it was an 03, and it had like 1,500 kilometers since new, and I would sneak it out every now and again and just drive it, and it would kill me to put miles on it. And I talked to my friend Burley Verlau, who's like a VW historian, and I talked to him, and he's telling me that he bought a brand new Mexican Beetle, so he'd be the guy to put every mile on it. I sold it after we talked about it and I had this conversation going with him. I thought, I'm gonna buy that Mexican bug back and I'm gonna drive it, dang it. Like I'm gonna put miles on the thing. Like there's other ones that people own that have low or no miles, especially with the Ultima edition that came out. But I thought, who gets to drive a brand new Volkswagen and put all the miles on it themselves? You know? It's like you with the 50. Who gets to have a 50 and just drive the crap out of it, you know?
Yeah, and it's the perfect one for that because it's not all shiny and fresh. And how many people have we seen that they restore a car, they make it perfect, and they hate it, and then they sell it, and then the person who buys it didn't put their blood, sweat, and tears into building it. They just wrote a check, and they have all kinds of fun with it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely I mean, you know, it's the point of it is to have the experience and enjoy it. So I think it's so awesome that you put that kind of time and effort in it behind the wheel, especially because I mean that's the best part to not only have it, but it's like, you know, listen, that's legend status. You know what I mean? Like the guy owns a 50 and drives it everywhere. Like because that's it. I mean, there's always a risk, right? Whenever you drive, what's the point if you're not enjoying it?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we got to have fun with them, and I don't want to own something if I can't drive it.
Yeah, and I think you actually made it more expensive to work on now with the Porsche, the 356 brakes and the Porsche motor. And what was cool is when I met you we met at the Red Barn Swap meet where we met, and you actually have the crank start, the crank starter pulley on, or the nut on the lower pulley, and you're actually crank starting the 356 motor, which I thought was pretty cool. And you actually let me do it. You let me do it one time, and I was pretty impressed with how, like, you know, pump it up with that compression cycle, turn the ignition on, and it just fires right up. You know, that's another cool factor aspect of it, right? That it's got the 356 motor, but yet you still have the crank start pulley on it, you know?
Yeah, and that was just a little custom thing we did. I mean, of course, buses were all the 36 horse and 25 horse buses were crank start to begin with, you know, stock, and that. But I don't know if anybody else had done that with a 356. But we're like, you know, it's a bus, make it crank start.
Right. So that brings up a question for me in respect to crank starts. On the early, you're saying most of the buses from 52 to 54, you're saying, are crank starts?
The 36 horse buses all the way up through mid 59, through most of 59 actually, were all crank start.
But they still had a electric starter as well.
Yeah.
That's interesting that they would they would leave a crank start on there. I mean, what was the point for that if you had electric starter?
I don't know. The Germans are kind of weird.
Just like a utility, just like a dual backup, maybe.
Yeah, and maybe they're like, this thing drives like a tractor, so we should make it start like a tractor.
Right. That's always been interesting to me, the whole crank start apron, because I've owned a bus or two with a crank start apron. I mean, back in the day, and I could never I never had the whole kit, the crank start and all that stuff, but I was fortunate enough to do that with yours. Now, with yours being a logo, is the logo that's on your bus the original logo?
Yes, and it's actually the oldest known bus with original logos on it.
Now, how old is the bus in the VW factory? Don't they have an early bus in the factory?
Yeah, they have one that is supposed to be bus number 10.
Really?
Yeah, and somebody I know was actually able to get in it, and they couldn't even find a number on it.
So, oh, really?
Yeah.
So does that make you suspicious, or does it? Or do you think in the early first 10 they probably didn't number them?
I'm not sure. I want to crawl over it and find out, but it is from the very first run of them. It's absolutely way earlier than anything else existing.
And they put out, I think a few years back, I mean, it might have been 20, 30 years ago, they put out like an ad looking for the oldest bust, and they were trying to, for the museum. Did I see something like that? Or am I dreaming?
Yeah, yeah. In the early '60s they
Maybe that's
did
what it was.
that, and then they found one and they traded the guy a brand new bus for it, and nobody knows what happened to the bus.
Well, I wonder what happened to the brand new bus. I wonder what the collectible value would be of the brand new bus from the 60s that they traded the guy.
Well, he probably just drove it into the ground.
Well, but I mean, would that make that bus more collectible? Does VW have that VIN number tracked of what bus they traded for the earliest bus that they could find at the time? I wonder.
Uh, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know on that. I know that they have the number of that bus. I think it's in one of these books here. I can actually look it up and
The number of the bus that VW tried to purchase, like, or are you talking about the number of the bus they traded for it?
yeah, the number of the bus that they that they got, the early one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I would think that'd be. I mean, the 60s would be a pretty good deal if you had an old busted up bus and you just decided to bring it to the dealership and swap it out for a new one.
Yeah, well, at the time it was just a worthless car, you know.
Right. But VW maybe knew to hold on to it for. I mean, just for their heritage in their museum. I wonder, where they found the next one from. Because you've got guys like Christian Greenman out there that they seem to have like they seem to find all the oldest Beetles, especially.
Yeah. Well, but then the 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 factory, it's a company, and so they'll do something like that for a promotion, and then they use some advertising. They put it in the back of the factory, and then 20 years later, an entirely different group of people are working there, and they don't care about that. That was a promotion from 20 years ago, and that's just a beat up old bus, and they scrap it out or whatever.
So, in the world of buses right now, what's been the most expensive bus that's sold thus far? I know everybody gets excited about the DNR restoration bus that went through Barrett Jackson. We can talk about why that one went so expensive, and it was probably time, people, and money that the reason why it went for what it went for. Because I don't think it was super scarce. That I think it was like a '62 that sold for the 250,000, where everybody got super excited about. But I know that there's buses that have sold for substantially more than that, and I know one of them is I think it's the Hornbecker bus, which is the one that sold for quite a bit of money. Um, and I think Kevin Bradburn owns it now.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
told Kevin when I met with him, I said they would be calling that bus the Bradburn bus if I bought that bus. I think you have the
no.
right to change the name when you buy it, But
Well, and there are people that are trying to brand it as the Steve Woods bus, because Steve Wood was the person who bought it from the dealership, actually.
oh, really?
Yeah, and then he sold it to Mike Hornbecker, and then Hornbecker had it for quite a few years, and so then it got branded as the Hornbecker bus, and then
And what makes that bus so special is that it is the lowest mileage original deluxe that people know of.
it's the nicest early barn door deluxe out there, and for a long time it was the the only really nice original barn door deluxe. There's actually another one came up that's also a low mileage, really nice bus, but it's a 54, and the that other one's a 52,
Right.
and has virtually all of the early features. It doesn't have the white roof like a 51, but other than that, it's pretty much the same.
Now, are there any white roofs out there?
Oh yeah.
Original, yeah. Or they're mostly all restored?
There are a couple restored ones, and then several that are in restoration, and then there aren't any that are like completely original paint. There is one that has an original paint roof because it's been stripped back to the original paint.
And so the Hornbecker bus, when Hornbecker, but now Mike Hornbecker that owned it, he was a VW collector, I'm assuming.
Yeah, a big time collector and enthusiast.
And he buys it in the 80s or the 90s?
I'm thinking it was the late 80s.
And I'm wondering, what's he pay for it when he buys it at the time?
I don't know, but I would guess he probably paid a lot, probably 20 grand, 25 grand, something like that.
That's a good investment.
Yeah. It's definitely an order of magnitude larger than that now.
Sure. Now, one from Mike Hornbecker, does it go to that's where it goes to Bradburn? Gets it from Hornbecker directly?
No, Mike Hornbecker sold it to Mac Jones.
Mac Jones, the doctor.
Yes. And then Mac sold it to Tim Nearhouse, and then he sold it to Gene Langen, and then Gene sold it to Kevin.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's it. It's a unique bus. It's definitely super nice. I've seen it. I've been to Kevin's warehouse where he's got those buses, and he's got a few nice buses. Me personally, I like the Smith. I think the Smith family bus is the one that's been restored, and I kind of like that one. It's a little shinier. I'm really, as you can tell, I'm super shallow and really superficial when it comes to driving my buses. But I think it's such a nice collection of buses, and I think it's neat that enthusiasts that are really into them are able to pick them up and then take them out and show them and get people to see them. Because I mean, I don't know if I had seen the Hornbecker bus all those years that it was owned by Hornbecker. You know what I mean? Up until he owned it, and then when it goes from Hornbecker, is he on the East Coast or West Coast?
He's on the West Coast.
So then when it goes to Mac Jones, and he's in, like the Tennessee area, right? Then it goes to Connecticut. So this bus has traveled all across the country, probably 3 miles put on the thing on and off trailers.
Well, so when Steve Wood bought it, it was in Oklahoma, I believe, and it was actually advertised in Hemmings Motor News. And so he flew out to Oklahoma and then drove it up to Seattle.
Drove the bus to Seattle?
Yeah.
I mean, what was there? There's 18,000 miles in that bus, I think it is, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And so he put a couple thousand of those miles on it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And one of my first really exciting bus experiences in California was in the mid 90s. I went down to the Classic and the Soto show and stuff, and I went to a party afterwards at Charlie Hamill's place. Mm-hmm. And for years, when Mike Hornbecker had it, it was stored at Charlie Hamill's. And Charlie would have parties after the VW Classic, and the bus was under a cover and stuff, and then they peel the cover off, and Mike Hornbecker is there at the party, and I'm looking at the bus, and he gave me the full tour of the bus.
Really?
Showed me everything about it, everything that he had done with it, And like the chrome on the hubcaps, he's like, in 52 they didn't have very good chrome, so it always went bad, so I had to have these re-chromed, and and just all these little things. And he was telling me at the time, he's like, I want to sell it, but I'll only sell it to an established collector in the United States or Europe. And at the time, a lot of cars were going to Japan, and
Right.
he said it's a black hole. Those cars never come out. They never get seen again. And
Yeah.
he wanted it to be seen. And ironically, now cars are coming out of Japan because buses have gone up so much in value that they can actually come back.
Have there been any buses that have come back that like rare buses that have come back to the States from Japan?
Oh yeah, multiple barn door deluxes have come back from Japan.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Wow. And what's a barn door deluxe selling for? Let's say like you find a barn door deluxe restored. What would you say it's going to cost you for one of those?
They're in the $250,000 range.
For a barn door deluxe.
Yeah.
And what do you think the total number of barn door deluxes is out today?
There's quite a few of them, maybe 90 or 100, just guessing.
I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a lot. I mean, I think.
Yeah, and they get a lot of exposure because people take them to shows all the time. It's like you can't go to an Octo show without seeing multiple barn door deluxes.
Now, what is the oldest deluxe that's special paint? The oldest special paint deluxe that's out there that anybody knows of?
There's a 51 in Germany that actually I got to check out in detail in 2019 when I was there. Got to sit in the driver's seat and look at the finer points of the curvature of the dash and things that are earlier than any other barn door deluxe. It's like this is it. Yeah.
And what color was it?
The bus, it's the 3-tone, chestnut and ceiling lights with the white roof.
Yeah, that's a pretty rare bird. So, but I guess would VW have any documentation of any special paint colors that were done, like the earliest one that's known to be out there? Any special paint or like I mean, besides the postal and the fire engine red?
I'm in I can't think of what VW has. Sometimes they don't mention, they'll say on the birth certificate that the color isn't mentioned.
Right.
And then also a lot of early barn doors were delivered in primer also to be painted by the customer.
Really?
Yeah. And that was an option all the way.
Is that on the M code plate, the primer? Well, I guess there's no M code plates then. The M code plates don't arrive until what year? 56?
It's early 59 model
50.
year.
So previous to 59, there's no M code plates.
Correct. However, the M codes are actually on the buses.
Really?
Yeah, they stamp them on with ink on the partition panel, and if you sandblast it off just right, you can actually see the M codes, and they're also on the valence behind the at the bottom of the nose. If you take the very front panel off, they were written in like grease pencil there. At least on some buses, and I've seen pictures of them. Yeah,
that's nuts. Wow. I mean, there's so much, and we can go so deep into the bus world that I definitely want to have you back on here, and I want to maybe we'll do a couple specials where we drill down on a couple segments of buses where we just kind of go through some of these things, because there's so much that we can deep dive on this, because like for me, because I'm more of a later model guy, what I really love is the slider door options that they were doing. Like, I think it was 63, they started the slider door option, you could get it.
Yeah, mid 1963 model year.
And one of my favorite buses that I've seen in some of the books that I have is, I think there's the double slider 21 window, I think it is.
Yeah, there's more than one of them known to exist.
But I just think that'd be such a cool option to have.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And I wonder if the technology of the slider door on the split sliders is the same as the late model sliders, or it's like if you've got an early split slider, like, is all the door mechs and all that stuff unique to that specifically?
They're not interchangeable.
Really?
It's the same dynamics, but the parts are not interchangeable.
So you find a split slider with all the guts missing, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah. I actually, on my last trip to Germany, a friend of mine texted me that he needed a slider door mechanism for a bus that he was working on, and I was at the Bad Camberg show, and one of the sellers there had exactly what he needed.
Oh, wow.
New stock, and it was like he hit the lottery,
And so what do you pay for something like that?
It wasn't bad. It was like
for a split.
Yeah, it was like $250 for the mechanism.
I mean, that's cheap. The hardest thing, I guess, is just finding it, right?
Yeah, but some things they're rare, but the cars that need it are rare too. So right. There's not a big market for it. You have to have a slider door bus with a broken mechanism.
So what's the most unique thing that you've seen when you've gone to Bad Camberg and stuff like that, that you've seen available that you thought you would never see, and then or maybe you thought it was super rare, and then you found out they could just have tons of them?
Well, the first time I went there, I was just like blown away, because like semaphores, they were like $20 a piece. And this was in 1999. Yeah, like just like you would see like, Can-Am taillights on a swap spot at Octo or something. There were semaphores. They were just everywhere. And I bought like 5 or 6 sets, but there's like so much cool stuff. And it's like, I have a limited amount of money, so I'll spend, $100, $200 buying semaphores, but then there's just so much other stuff.
Now, these are just the semaphore lenses you're talking about?
No, the complete,
like the whole semaphore assembly? Good grief. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I was like, it was great. I brought them back to the States, and I'm selling them for $150 a piece.
Yeah, and you're thinking, if you'd have put those in a vault for a while, what's a set of semaphores go for today?
Probably about the same.
Oh, they haven't gone up that much now. And the semaphores of the bus and the bug are interchangeable.
Yeah.
So the semaphores were a production thing for Volkswagen.
Exactly.
Now, what year do semaphores stop on the buses, or can you get later model buses with semaphores as an option? Like, they have the European bugs that have semaphores and later big window bugs.
Yeah, just like the bugs, 1960 was the last year for semaphores in most of the world.
Now, why would they do semaphore? Why would somebody do semaphores if they already came out with regular flashing turn signals? Like, what would cause it to be? Was it a standard option, or what was the reason for having semaphores? Was it regional?
Yeah, that was the standard thing. The bullet turn signals were a U.S. spec thing that just a few countries, United States, Canada, and maybe Italy too. But most of the world was semaphore up through 60.
Oh, really? So they probably had bullet turn signal conversion kits to update your bus to a U.S. spec?
Yeah, well, actually, in Germany, they just had to continually update them. So anything that was on the road in once they came out with the new one, or maybe a couple of years in, like say in the early 60s, everything had to have the bullet turn signals. And then when they went to the canned ham taillights in 62, or a couple of years after that, all the German cars had to have those. And so they just continually upgraded them. And if you see any car that was on the road in the mid 60s in Germany, it has mid 60s taillights.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, because of their inspection process, you've got to either update it or park the car.
Exactly.
Oh, that's wild. No, that's look, it's awesome, man. I definitely, we can go on for a couple more hours, but I definitely appreciate you coming on. I dig your story. I'm stoked about the SüFunk Bus. Before we wrap up, what other stuff do you got in your collection of cars? How many cars, or you don't really want to talk about your collection stuff, or you? I mean, what stuff is there in your collection that you have as far as your lineup of buses? Because we just talked and you said just recently for the show up in Idaho, you finally have all these project buses, and you were like, you just got a bunch of them running just to take it to that event.
Yeah. So for the show last summer, I decided to spend a couple months working on stuff, and I got 9 buses, 9 split buses running for the show. Wow. But some actually not most of, like 4 of them ran before I started that project, and then I made 5 other ones run. But I have a couple more panel vans, a couple 58 panels. I have a 57 Westy, a 57 Combi, a couple 61 standards, a couple 65 pickups.
Nice. that's it. And most of these have you gotten from collectors, or most of these you've picked up behind a house, or like the adventure of the finds and stuff like that?
All over the place. Like when we were talking earlier, that Mango bus that I bought in 1993, I still have that and still drive that bus.
Oh, really? So that's like your oldest owning bus that you've had for a long time.
Yeah, and it's my favorite car as well.
It's like an old shoe. You just get right in it, and it fits perfect.
Yeah, it's just great. And then there's just all over the place. I find them, and I know quite a few people. And like the summer before last, a friend of mine found a bus locally in a backyard for $500 and hooked me up with it. And I get the thing home, and I start cleaning it up, and is pretty cool bus and stuff. And I'm looking at the VIN number. It's like, this is really, really familiar. And then I go and I look at my 57 Westy, and it was exactly 20 buses newer than my 57 Westy.
Oh wow, that's pretty neat to get to. I mean, in 57, what year did they start importing buses to the U.S.?
1950.
Yes. So you could buy them in the U.S. in 50?
Yeah.
So I wonder how many of those early 50 buses, because I would think in the U.S. they'd trash them faster than they would in Europe. So I'm wondering if these origin buses, like your 50s, obviously from Germany, the other 50s that are out there, how many are U.S. delivered 50s?
The earliest known existing U.S. spec bus is a January of 51 bus.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there are no 50s known, but according to the numbers, they imported 2 of them in 1950.
Oh, you got a 2 in a million chance to own those. So no, that's yeah. I tell you, it's awesome what you're doing for the hobby. It's really awesome to feel your enthusiasm for buses in particular. Now, is there any dirty secrets in there? Do you own any other Volkswagens besides buses, or are you just a bus guy?
Yeah, I have a couple Carmen Gias also.
Early Carmen Gias?
Yeah, I have a 57 and also a 61.
Of course, I wouldn't expect you to have a 73. Right.
Well, and I only count cars that I care about. I mean, there's other cars too that I have that I don't actually care about.
Sure.
Oh,
No,
I'm sure you have the same.
oh yeah. I mean, there's tons of stuff out there, but I think the unique thing about Volkswagens, like you and I are on two different ends of the spectrum, right? I'm into the custom fast bus and but in the same respect, there's so much mutual appreciation for both sides of the hobby. And really, here's one shell of a vehicle that was sold as a station wagon in the United States, and it's like, here's two guys talking about them like they're the coolest things since sliced bread. But I mean, I think it's got such a broad appeal, and it was really marketed to women. I think in the early marketing, in at least stateside, you know. So
Yeah, there's some great ads actually trying to sell buses to women, and
no,
the campers, the women love the campers. It's like a holiday home on wheels.
yeah, no. Well, one of the things that I would love to find, and it probably doesn't exist, but I think it's so cool, is I've got a bunch of old Life magazine ads that I bought going to the swap meet since the 90s, paying $2 for them or whatever. But I have one that says the VW station wagon so big the entire town of Jiggs, Nevada fits inside this. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a red and white 21 window. And I looked up Jiggs, Nevada, like middle of nowhere, Nevada. And it's like the entire town, the mayor, the this, and there's like 12 people in the town or something like that, and a dog, or 8 people and a dog, something like that. And I keep thinking, man, I wonder if they actually gave that bus to somebody in Jiggs, Nevada, and a guy could go to Jiggs, Nevada and find that bus, but it was, go ahead.
Funny you mention it, but a friend of mine, Eric Carlson, tried to track it down, and he called up, and Jiggs still exists,
Yeah,
and he's able to talk to somebody who remembered the bus and wasn't able to track it down, but it was a real thing, and I think they gave it to the school district or something.
really.
I'll have to ask him, but he's able to get a little ways down the path of finding it.
Right? That's what I'm sitting here thinking. I'm thinking, like, how cool would that be to find the Jiggs, Nevada bus? That's just, it's just the marketing campaign that they did with the buses was so unique, and I mean, with all their cars, but it's just so awesome to see all those really unique advertising, and they were like the first of their kind to do some of those.
Yeah, their advertising was like award winning.
Yeah, the most self-deprecating advertising in the world. Almost like it was they would just make fun of themselves in such a humble way that it was endearing to made you really think, like, what, I'm a humble guy. I'll get a Volkswagen. I'm not pretentious. Yeah, that's it. I have the same Jiggs, Nevada ad, and I think it's so cool, man. Just some of those things that they did. Yeah, and we were talking about your bus being a logoed bus. Now you just came across, we were talking earlier, you came across an entire portfolio of a huge collection of logoed buses. I mean.
Yeah, just page after page after page of logoed buses.
And now was that like a dealer display brochure of what you could do, like different examples of what you could do?
Yeah, like a dealership would have this and then show it to prospective commercial customers.
And they say, just pick your design, we'll put your company name on there, and we'll have it painted for you.
Or have a sign painter do it, but
sure.
This is what other people have done. And I had a really interesting one. There was a somewhere of all kinds of literature here, but there's this the owner's viewpoint, which is a piece of literature I got 20 years ago or so. And I
Yeah.
start thumbing through it, and I come to where there's a bus from Boise, Idaho,
Oh wow.
a local one, and it was from Holsinger's Music, and a friend of mine from high school, his last name was Holsinger, and so I talked to him, and as it turns out, his grandfather was the original owner. He's seen in the pictures there, and the family hadn't seen the bus since the 60s. And
Now I gotta ask this question. Were you like good friends with this guy? Or you're like, wait a second, Holstinger, I'm putting the piece together. I'm gonna call this guy randomly. I don't know, we're like a crazy man. It's like, hey, long time no see, haven't talked to you since high school. Got a question.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like, hey, kind of maybe want to rekindle this relationship, but it depends on the answer to this next question. Does Grandpa still have the bus?
Yeah. And then it gets crazier though. I keep researching. I actually come up with a color picture of the bus. A friend of mine finds a color picture of it.
Oh, really?
And yeah, but I've like completely given up on finding it. I look at every 58 panel in town to see if it could be, because the bus I knew had been painted red,
right,
and logo. Nothing lines up, there are 5 or 6 buses, 58 panels around town that I looked at. None of them were it. And then about 6 years ago, I was down in Reno visiting my friend Mitch Case, and in his backyard, we walk out and look because he's got a bunch of buses in his backyard, and instantly recognized there it was.
No
and
way.
It's like, yeah, and I mean within a fraction of a second of when I saw it, I was like, I must have this.
Oh wow!
It's just like, okay.
And what year was that bus?
It's a 58.
Does it still have the logos on it?
Oh yeah.
Did it really?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, how ironic is that you're there, you stumble across the picture of this bus, and then you go on this crazy hunt for this bus, and it's a lost cause at this point, and then like you just stumble across it, and another bus collector owns it. That's just incredible, man. But that's how hardcore your passion goes, right? Like it's in the back of your memory, and just you're waiting for the time to run across it. So how complete was it?
It was missing one of its doors, and then every other part was missing. It had, out of the buses have 5 doors, it had 4 of them, and every other part was missing. I mean, the front end was not the original front end.
Really?
Yeah, just it had lived a hard life, not really rusty, but it
battered and bruised.
Excuse me. Like all 4 wheel wells were cut, but it's a panel van, and panel vans don't have many parts, so
yeah. Well, the hobby is just, it's so intense with the different level of details. I mean, I think it's just it's always exciting. There's always something around the corner, a new bus being discovered, a new, and everything is tied to the history of a time and a place. Like you with your bus being tied to Idaho, and you've been able to track it down. I mean, here in Vegas, I've seen pictures of buses, logoed panel buses from Vegas that are either specific to a casino or to something out of here in Las Vegas that's Vegas specific. And I'm absolutely positive most of them probably end up in my buddy Justin Beetlebarn's yard and got chopped up and crushed and shipped away. So it's pretty intense with the the lives these things travel. And I've often thought the coolest movie, in my opinion, would be the movie from but maybe it'd be a super geek like me to figure this out. But I always thought, and I wanted to do this for my bus of, the life that it went through from the bus's perspective. You know, being a brand new shiny bus at a dealership, some family comes and buys it and they just love the heck out of this thing. And then somehow some new thing comes along, it ends up on a used car lot, another guy gets it, and then this bus ends up in Goldfield, Nevada, of all places, right? Literally the middle of nowhere, and it sits dormant for 9 years. You know what I mean? Well, yeah, it's 9 years old and it's abandoned until 2000 when I bought it, and it sits there. I have pictures of it before I touched it, and it's just sitting there next to an abandoned mobile home. And the life of this bus, because my bus has had quite a fun life since I've picked it up and got her back on the road. She's seen thousands of miles, and you know, been on TV shows and all kinds of stuff. But just to think, like, if you could capture that in a 20-minute segment of what that perspective would be, because I think, you know, I think a lot of us people that are really into cars, we believe like these cars have a soul. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And the adventures that they go on, and buses, I think that buses, the people who own them are more interesting than your average people.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
And so the things that they're going to do, the places that are going to go, and yeah, it's like your bus, it's sitting in the desert and it's like waiting to die, you know.
Right. Yeah.
It's just waiting, and it's like anything can happen to it, and you know, some the price of scrap can go up, and some guy can come along and it can get crushed and turn into rebar, you know.
Yeah.
But instead it gets saved. And
Oh yeah.
sure
And you think, and I keep thinking from the perspective of the bus, right? How happy the bus is to be utilized as a utilitarian purpose in life, to cart the family around, to go run errands, to do whatever. Like the bus is just happy doing its job, and then it goes to its death sentence. And then when it's revived and brought back, not only does it's just not just a utilitarian bus, but it's celebrated at car shows. And my kids, like, since my kids are, you know, a year old, all they've known is like, oh, our dad's making us go on the bus again. But you know, and just the fun that bus was able to provide for my family. And like, if you could talk to the bus of how happy it'd be, because one of the interesting things is just recently we were going through and doing the roof swap on it. And so I pulled all the panels out and did all this stuff. And when I quote unquote restored it back in 2000, it was a 2000 level restoration, right? Paint, new interior, stuff like that. It didn't need any metal work, so I didn't do any metal work, but it didn't get like new wiring harness, all stuff, because everything was pretty decent, right? So as I'm going through, and I'm going through the front bulkhead, and I'm fishing stuff out of there because I'm hearing things are in there, and I pull out a Southern California road map from 1967. So it's like, it's a travel map, and I've got it sitting in my garage. I want to actually get it framed, but I'm just thinking, like, at some point that bus was on a road trip with a family in 67, you know, and it's just such a cool idea to think, man, if that bus could talk of all the things that it's been through, you know. So I don't know. I think it's just something that car people get when they really are into like saving these things from utter destruction and being able to get them back on the road and have them live a little bit of a life, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's rad, man. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Anything before we wrap up? Any special thanks you want to give any people, or shout outs to people that have helped you along the way with your obsession that you might want? I mean, it's probably an endless list, but you know.
Oh, there's so many people. My friend Chris Brooks was my first VW friend who really, you know, showed me kind of the way to start and go. And then my friend Isaac Scott was the early on we were hunting VWs together, and my friend Louis Conkle, and we started the local VW club here together, and then Troy Wheeler, another great local guy, although he moved to Texas, but
yeah, shout out to Troy because that's how we connected, because I've known of you for a while, and then Troy and I remember first time I met Troy was at the first VW Classic when I was debuting my bus, and he was just busting my chops, man, the whole time. He was razzing me the whole time, and the best part is he didn't even know me, and he was really busting my chops. I said, I like this guy, like, because as soon as he started ribbing me, I started giving it right back to him. And it was funny, we had a short encounter, but every couple of years we'd see each other to show and just, hey, what's up, buddy? How you been? Whatever, back and forth, and then just carry on with everything, But it's interesting how the hobby brings people together like that,
Yeah, just a real quick Troy Wheeler story. So his 52 bus, his barn door.
Yeah.
He calls me up and he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go buy this 52 in New Mexico. You want to come down with me and drive it back?" And this is like pre 9/11. It's like, oh yeah, great. We like load up. I load a duffel bag full of tools. I was daily driving oval at the time, and so I like 36 horse. I take the carburetor, the distributor, and the fuel pump off, throw them in the bag. We take it carry on the airplane, and
oh wow,
and drive that thing back with the 36 horse. And at one point, we're driving back. We're going downhill into a headwind, and I can't keep it in fourth gear. It's like,
oh, it's popping out of gear.
No, it's like there isn't enough power.
Oh wow!
I'm having to downshift going downhill.
Downhill? That's brutal.
Because there was a headwind. It was that slow, but we made it home.
No, listen, and that's really what it's about, because the cars, I think, the cars give us a purpose to take these ridiculous adventures that we'd never do. I mean, I've done stuff where I've driven 12 hours straight with a buddy, picked something up, and just turned right back around because it was between work hours and what I got to do to go get this thing, but it was such a good deal or whatever the case was. And it's just the road trip aspect of it, the traveling part of it. I mean, there's so much to be had, man. It's just I'm thankful for the hobby. It's the reason why I do the podcast, because I love it, man. I love the hobby, I love the people, and I love all the stories connected to it, man.
Absolutely. I love the cars. I like the people more.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Lynn, I appreciate you, man, for coming on. And this will not be the only time we have you on. For sure, we're going to come up with some nonsense bus stuff to go over. And it's not nonsense, but I really want to, and in the past, when we've done podcasts, we've really started dissecting stuff and getting into some details. People really give me a lot of feedback on that stuff because they really enjoy those types of educational podcasts. So I'm committing to that we will definitely do some more in the future, because there's, like I said, we've been on for 2 hours now, man, and it's there's a lot to go over here. So, man, I appreciate you coming on.
We're just getting started.
That's it.
I look forward to it, and it was great talking with you about VWs.
No, man, I love it, man. I definitely appreciate it. All right, boom. We're good to go right there, buddy. That's 2 hours, man. 2 hours of good stuff. So I love it, man. I just think there's so much more that we can do, especially if, because some of the stuff that I want to do, I'm working on one right now that I'm kind of doing a little bit that I'm doing solo, because I've reached out to a couple of Type 3 people to come on with me, and I wanted to do a history of the Type 3, where we kind of go through from a general standpoint and do the history of it up until, from just the early up to 67, from 61 to 67, and then go through, why they were imported, just the story of it. And I definitely like to do that with the bus, and then follow up with like the early years and go into a little more detail, and then the mid years and a little more detail, and then the later years, but I think there's so many neat things where it's like a lot of things happened in the hobby because of the purpose. Like because chrome was bad, they changed to this, and because this was, everything kind of the form follows function aspect of things. And I think there's so much of that becomes those like aha moments where people are like, oh, that's why they did that. You know what I mean? So I think there's just a ton of cool, intricate things like that in the history of the buses, and buses, I think, there's tons of history on bugs, you know what I mean? Lots of the Beetle and stuff like that. But I think buses, there's not a ton out there, but there's some stuff, but it's, it'd be cool. I think it'd be cool to walk through it.
Yeah. And, buses are such a deep topic as far as just the variety of the model. Like I wrote one transporter talk where all I did and my transporter talks are like, 800 to 1,000 words, right?
Right.
All I did was list different models of buses. No description or anything. It's like double cab pickup, refrigerator truck, ladder truck, glass hauling truck.
Right.
Yeah. And just, it was, I don't know, 900 words, 1,000 words of, not more than 2 or 3 per model. And
that's
just
incredible.
Yeah. And it's like with buses, we can, of course, we can get really in the weeds on it and stuff, but it's like, I see there's 3 main models. There's, commercial models, campers, and passenger cars.
Right. Yeah.
And then each one can go really deep. And then you can have your combi with a SO22 camper kit, and it's all 3. It's a passenger model, it's a camper, and it's a commercial model.
Yeah. And I think you could do a whole podcast just on SO23s.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Just first, we're going to start out. I mean, I think that the structure would be first start out. We talk about a camper, and then what's one of the more unique features of this camper, and then why is this particular model so desirable? You know what I mean? So I think as you just go through that, like I said, we did 2 hours, man, and it did it feel like 2 hours to you?
I knew that we had blown past an hour.
But I mean, we get into the conversation. There's just so much crossover and connection with, with history and stories, and whether it's personal or, factual about the lineup and the model, man. And I tell you, man, I think, when I was talking about my idea for a short film, I think that would be just the coolest short film ever. Because I like we all have sentimental feelings about our car, so I didn't want to get too cheesy, but I think about my bus, and I think like my bus at some point thought it was left for dead, and then for it to not only get over restored to the level it did the first time it's shown, it takes first place, and then it's on a TV show, you know what I mean? Because we're on the TV show Bull Run, and then it like finals, and then even still, it's like the pride of the guy who owns it. So everywhere he goes, people are gawking over. Also, still to this day, I take it to like Cars and Coffee and stuff like that, and everybody just loves the bus, man. They just love the look of it. And then even right now, I took all the Bull Run logos off of it and everything, which my brother's like, I can't believe you're doing that. And I said, this bus is not dead, man. Like this bus has an evolution of its life, and now we put the roof section on it. I'm going to do the cargo area more like facing face-to-face seating setup for a mobile podcast studio. You know what I mean? Like, so when I'm at a show or whatever, I've got my nice big sunroof. There'll be a couple hard-mounted mic mounts on the in between the windows, and I think it'd just be so cool. It'll be the Let's Talk Dubs bus. So,
is it a walkthrough or a bench seat?
It's a bench seat bus.
Okay, so a couple things. You're never going to regret putting a sunroof in it. One thing you got to do is have somebody else drive it and stand up out of that sunroof.
Oh, really?
Going down the freeway.
Yeah.
Dude, it is awesome because like when you're a kid and you stand up in the back of a pickup truck and it's like exciting, but you feel like you might like death is imminent, you know?
Right.
But with a bus, it's not like that because there's body all around you. Just a little bit of you is out of the top, but you can see everything, and you got like the wind in your hair. It's an incredible feeling. And then, as far as like putting the two seats facing each other, you're going to be really close to the person in the back. Like, the way the seats are, there's not a lot of space. Like the campers are really tight like that. So one thing you might consider, like what I did with my Mango bus, I cut out the seat partition and I put two swivel seats in, and it opens it up and it makes it so much more comfortable.
Really?
It's a total hack. Like, I'll drive my Mango bus down and you can sit in it and feel, but 4 people hanging out in that bus is so comfortable. It's a different car.
And you had original VW swivel seats in there, or you just put aftermarket swivel seats in there?
No, VW swivel seats.
Now, was that like an option that they could buy and it was like bolted to the thing, or was it welded at the factory?
It's they're on, well, from the factory they're on rails. I just bolted them down in a fixed location. But
they go on the factory seat rail?
It's unique to the swivel seat buses.
Yeah.
Swivel seats were available 59 through 62. It was either panel vans or combis, mostly panel vans, that they were single seat buses, just a driver's. The combis could have seats in the back, but never a passenger seat in swivel seat buses.
Yeah.
But what I did, I cut the partition and folded it down. I put 2 swivel seats in, which they're incredibly hard to find.
Well, what about doing a flip seat? A flip seat in my bus?
Yeah, a flip seat would work too. And it's hacking, but it makes it work. It totally like
I got to come on. That's what I haven't designed yet was the interior setup, because I'd like for it to be where, I interviewed RK Smith at Octo like 2 years ago when I was there, and we were in my buddy's camper bus. So I just kind of clipped a couple microphones on the end of the table, and there's a couple pictures. But I look like Godzilla in the back of that thing. I look like I'm a giant in that because, I'm all of 6 foot and over 200 pounds. So, but it was a little bit tight, but it was more like he sat kind of sideways and I sat kind of sideways across, almost like you sit in a booth at a restaurant. You know what I mean? So, I almost thought maybe doing an L bench so you have a little more room. You know what I mean? I don't know. I keep thinking of how to do it. There's a guy in England that does interiors on these buses, and I forget his name, but I'll send you a link. But he does some super cool interiors on the buses, just something like that's a little more contemporary. But but I really want it to be like outfitted nice inside, where it's like everything's kind of integrated for the podcast, where I just kind of flip a switch and turn the mics on and just can record everything and do it right there, and actually have some fixed camera mounts and stuff so we could do the whole thing. Because I just think it's just such a, doing the podcast is just my favorite thing to do as my hobby. It's there's so much to be told out there, so.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. And definitely look into the flip seat or swivel seats or something. You can put Vanagon swivel seats in.
A flip seat. If I were to do a flip seat on that, how hard is a flip seat set up to find?
They're kind of hard to find, and you just spend a little money on it. Probably $1,000 or something. But
I wonder if a guy could just fab his own flip seat setup. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. You can make it work. I actually have some period pictures where a guy did that in a sunroof standard. And the other thing is, with a sunroof and with the open sunroof, it opens up the bus and it feels bigger. It's more comfortable. My 61, my Mango bus, when you I'll drive it down and you can sit in it and you'll see it. You'll be like, this is comfortable. This is
for sure
where it's at.
When are you headed down south next? Like to are you going to the next Octo? And what's Octo going to be in February?
Yeah, maybe February Octo. Maybe I'll
do you come through Vegas to go to that, or you just go straight down the 5? You cut across top of Nevada, or what?
I usually go down like 395 and go through like Bishop. But sometimes we go through 93 and go through Vegas.
Well, if you loop through Vegas next time, are you going to be driving your bus down, or are you going to tow it down?
I drive it.
Well, if you drive it down, then what we'll do is we'll just caravan from here down there. That would be cool to do. You know what I mean? Because for sure my crew cab will be running, because that one's my go-to. What I'm waiting on right now for the Bull Run bus is hydraulic suspension. Have you seen the hydraulic suspension?
I'm unfamiliar with it.
So it's not like lowrider style hydraulic. You still have all the factory shocks and torsion bars and all that stuff. It's a new front beam that has a short hydraulic ram that, with a touch of a button, rearticulates the center fixed point in the beam. And you cut the rear center section out of the rear torsion housing, and you put a swiveling one in there. And there's another short hydraulic ram set up in the back. So you hit a button and it'll adjust the suspension. And wherever the bus sits, it's got the factory ride. So it's the stock spring tension, all that stuff. It's genius. Like this guy, I interviewed a guy on the podcast, Demon Motorsports is his name. If you look him up on Instagram or even on Facebook, it is the coolest thing, because it's like he uses a lift gate motor for a truck, like a lift gate pump setup that sits on the opposite side of the battery tray. It fits right there. You don't need any auxiliary batteries. You push a button, and it's fairly rapid speed that it goes up and goes back down, because you're only taking a hydraulic cylinder and moving it 2 or 3 inches. It's crazy.
And there's no balance or play in it or anything?
No, because all it does is it rearticulates your torsion fixed points. So it's like having an adjustable beam on demand, like up or down, and the rear having adjustable torsions. Well, you couldn't do that because we keep thinking the outsides. But when you're rearticulating the center fixed torsion housing, the fixed point, well, then you just raise and lower the car like almost instantly. It's crazy.
So, is it like a straight axle or an IRS setup?
It can do either. So he says if you really want to like lay it on the ground, you'll want to do IRS setup and then like you make like a lowered rear trailing arm, like a stepped rear trailing arm. So it's already lowered a few inches. So you can lower it or raise them, because you can take it back up to stock height with the push of a button, like, and it's not, you're waiting for airbags. You don't have all that nonsense noise. And the hydraulic setup is designed to run at like 3 times the PSI. So it's like the entire system will never fail. It's super ingenious, but it's also $7,000. And I bought it back in like April, and the guy said, I bought it back it was probably last December, or I think I bought it in January possibly. And then, because I did a podcast with the guy because I saw it online, I thought, man, this is ingenious, because he makes a Beetle setup and a bus setup. And with the bus setup, he makes an entire new front beam that has a hydraulic ram right in the center of it, a short throw hydraulic ram. And it's got both center torsion fixed points that are articulating together off of one ram solenoid. And then it uses a Vanagon. It has a true rack and pinion front steering, and it uses a Vanagon like a reverse steering box where you turn where it's got it's got an in and out on the same side, and it's a 180 steering box or something like that. So I just reached out to him again. I said, hey, what's going on with this? And he says, I've been waiting on these parts because of delays and shipping and blah blah blah. So it's I'm still waiting because that's the other reason why the bus is not back together. Otherwise, my bus would be back together by now. But it's like I'm just waiting for this hydraulic suspension where I can lay the bus out and then bring it up, like adjust the height. Because I'd love to take my same bus to Octo all laid out and then be able to take it to the Shasta snow trip. You know what I mean? Like, how cool would that be? Just change the wheels and tires and just hit the button, raise it up, and you've got the stock suspension. So,
nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm excited to get it back. I mean, that's the thing with when I looked at my bus, because it's like she's been old trusty for all these years, and I thought, I'd really like to just redo some things on it a little nicer. But then that's why I'm going through the whole makeover, the rebirth again of my bus. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So, but yeah, I'll keep you posted. I'll keep you posted on that, and for sure, man. Let's hammer out an idea for another podcast on something bus specific, because I think I'd love to do it, because I just think there's so much information that needs to get out there, and I just like talking about it, and then people can just sample it while we're creating this media outlet for VW bus enthusiasts. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
Yeah,
This is great.
yeah.
I love, talking about buses.
That's it. Well, you're my guy, man. You're my guy that we're going to do this. So I'll launch this podcast tomorrow, and I'll send you a link in it so you can share it through your resources or whatever, and then we'll get to something. I'll start putting something together, because I think what I want to do is like I said, I want to do a history of the Type 2, starting from inception to, because was it Ben Pon, or Ben Pon was the guy that did the bus, right? He's the one that came with the sketch.
Yeah, he did the sketch, and then the VW developed the actual.
Right. But he kind of gave him like, you guys need to make something like this, and that's where it kind of started. Because I just like to do it because people, I think, are too lazy to read and do stuff like that. But I think the more we get information like this out there, the more not only entertaining but educational it is to people.
Absolutely, and yeah, it's like I say, it's such a deep topic. I mean, we can go off for a couple hours several times a year, for forever.
No, without question, man. Without question. If you see some areas that you want to drill down on, I mean, shoot them my way, and we'll hammer out kind of an outline for it. And then it's a natural conversation, but you can be educating at the same time. You know what I mean? So I think it definitely, because it makes it easier with two people. You know what I mean? Especially if I'm probing with questions and then you're pushing out the information, then we keep it on track and move it through that way. But this initial one it's all freestyle, because it's your story, and it's a natural evolving conversation, which is what really makes a lot of people really like it. So yeah, man.
Yeah, it was great. Oh, and real quick, do you subscribe to Hot VWs?
I do. I just read your article about 10 minutes before I got on here about the panel buses.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that's the first one on models, and all 12 of 2022 are just going to be models. Like, the standard microbus is next, and then combi, and then 4 months of Westphalia,
and what I'll do also in the intro to the podcast, I'll also mention for people that want a little bit of more information on a regular basis to subscribe to Hot VWs for the transporter talk. You know what I mean? Like, just to get that extra wealth of information that they're going to get on a monthly basis.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, no doubt, man. That's rad. I'll do that for sure, man.
I appreciate pumping up the magazine, because it's, print media's kind of
dying. Yeah, there's no question about that. So when I go back through and I listen to this, because I have our video that's been recorded right now, I want to do, because like even the Hornbecker bus, like just the story on that bus, and I didn't know if it was common knowledge of what he paid for it. I think he paid close to $400 for that bus. Right at $400.
Uh, it was more than that. He told me the number, and
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't repeat it just because
Hey,
you know.
listen, if you've got the money and you've got the desire, because I had lunch with him and Rich Craig, and it was me and my wife and those two, and I was talking to Kevin about. I said, well, I'd like to do a podcast with you just about if we, because that's what I told him. I said, if it's me, bro, they're calling it the horn, not the, they're calling it what's his last name? It's this Bradburn. I'm like, they're calling that the Bradburn bus, bro. Nobody's calling it the Hornbecker no more. They're calling it the Bradburn bus. When I pay that kind of money for that bus, man, we're changing the name. But yeah, he's got a neat collection.
And you'll put out the audio pretty soon, but then like the video might come later, or do you put out the video at the same time?
No, what I'll do is I'll work on editing this video up probably in the next week or two. But what I'll do is get a list of the things that we talked about so that I can maybe do a small sub segment of it and put in some of those pictures.
Yeah, if you want to just hit me with a list of things, because I'm not going to remember them all, but
sure.
A list of things. I have like, a bus porno picture for every topic.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt.
And I mean, I was like, just while we're talking, I can reach and grab all kinds of stuff off of the shelves and do that. I did that a couple times. But
and what we'll do next time is, so I have a project. I have a software called Switcher Studio, which is like literally like it's like a TV. And it's like a live TV show, right? So as you're talking, I hit a button, the camera cuts to you. When on the future ones that I'd like to do, we'll kind of outline a little bit where we're gonna have some pictures of stuff we'll talk about. I get those pictures, load them in, and I just tap the screen as soon as you start talking about it. It goes full screen to the image of what we're talking about. When I cut back to image of you, there'll be a lower third that'll say Lynn Bjornson, and it'll, what I mean? Like it'll have your title underneath there. Like it's really actually good quality. And next time I didn't even think about that, because my challenge with that is with my new audio interface, I'm wanting to get the audio extracted and put into this so I can put the podcast out. So the next time we'll do it, we'll kind of have a little bit more planned out with some pictures and stuff in advance. And as you're talking about things, I can just tap buttons on my screen and it'll take the screen and do that. And this software, I can actually even go live. Like I can go Facebook Live or YouTube Live or whatever the case is, but we'll do a little more planned out on that one, on like a history one. Maybe when we're just going to do the general history of the bus from beginning, almost like the four different of the split buses, because that's about what we're figuring, right? About four different segments from barn doors to pre-60s to the two splits of the 60s, right? I mean, roughly four levels, kind
of. Yeah, I'd say in the 18 years of split buses, there's four generations.
And I think it'd be cool because we could do that. We could talk about generation one, and then some of the things from start to finish. We can talk about total production numbers, things like that. And I think if we really plan it out good with an outline, doing this back and forth, by the time we're done with the podcast, there'll be a completed video that will launch at the same time. And it really just comes into the prep time of it. Like, how are we breaking it down, and what? Because there's going to be, the history is the history, and we're going to have these points that we want to talk about. And if we're looking at it, like, let's say we're going to do it 15 minutes per section, right? We'll make it an hour 15. So we'll do a 15-minute intro on the concept, the bus, the prototyping, the evolution, the beginning of production, and then the first gen, second gen, third gen, and fourth gen. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So yeah, because I can do that. I can do that for sure on the next one that we'll do. I'm getting ready to do one on a Type 3, which is just going to basically be me telling the audio story of the history of the Type 3. And so what I've done with that is I've got several books, and I'm making notes of the history, but putting it in my own words. you know. So that one I've got that almost ready to record, and I'll get that one put out there. But here, I'll show you a cool picture real quick. Hold on. I just saw this over here. Let me see. That's my
Nice.
bus.
That was where it was sitting when you got it?
Yep. You see the matching California plates?
Uh-huh.
I think I sold those for like $50 at Pomona. The dumb part is I looked at it and I said, I mean, this was my bus when I got it. So if you actually look at that to see that you could find a deluxe bus, I mean,
Nice.
even the rear bumper that's sitting behind it, the rear bumper, I took a 68 bumper and that bumper to a chrome shop. I took them both to a chrome shop and I said, this bumper is straight. Drill the holes in this one for the overriders and use this one. They straightened the original bumpers on it. So like the bumpers, the window frames, all the sheet metal, like everything is original on that bus. And there was really no metal work that had to be replaced. Under the carpet inside the bus, it's still the original white.
Nice.
So yeah, it's crazy, man. Like, and the crazy story about that bus is that when I found it in '92, I was like, oh my gosh, a deluxe, man. I can't believe it. It's a deluxe. Like they're so rare. I mean, because in the 90s, you didn't see like a 21 and those things were like they're super rare compared to what we would see in the street scene, not in the stock scene, but the street scene. And I found it with my buddy in that trip, and it was like, and the crazy part, I did an Instagram. If you go back on my Instagram, I did an Instagram reel, or it might have been a live. Yeah, this was the views you drove through the street in Goldfield, Nevada. As you drove down the 395, that's what you could see when you look to the right. And there used to be a super nice Dove blue double cab at the gas station. Right when you were pulling into town, there was an old, like a mechanic shop and gas station. And when I bought this bus, I was talking to the guy that owned it, the guy's kid, and he was like, "Yeah, my dad doesn't want to sell it for anything less than $2,000. It's pretty rare." And I'm like, "Yeah, those aren't that rare. I used to have one." You know what I mean? Like, and actually in Goldfield, Nevada, like a street over from where that one was, it was like a shed that had a camper bus in it, a blue and white camper bus. And it was a split camper, and I wasn't even into campers. I was like, yeah, I don't need a camper, whatever. And then years later, I was like, where's that bus at? But Goldfield's super weird because they've got so many cars in Goldfield, Nevada. And it's because there was a guy that had a huge wrecking yard a couple miles away from Goldfield, and the state came in and said he had to get rid of all the cars because he was having an illegal wrecking yard or something. And so he just went to Goldfield, told all the people to come get all the cars that they wanted, and that's why all those cars were there. I mean, I connected a buddy of mine to a 62 Squareback that was there. You know what I mean? Like there was so much cool stuff there back in the early 90s. So yeah, man, good stuff, brother. Good stuff, man. Well, Lynn, it was great, man. It was a great chat with you, man. I look forward to hanging out with you next time I see you. And then for sure, if you decide to come down for Octo for February, I'll set up, because a bunch of us usually drive down. So last time we went down, there was like 5 of us that went down. It was like 3 double cabs, a panel, and a standard microbus. So yeah, we bombed down there, and we don't slow foot it down there. So it'd be I think it'd be a good time, man.
Nice. Yeah. My Mango Cruise is 65. So I don't know if you guys go that slow or anything, but
yeah, well, listen, we'll wait up for you. We'll make it easy. At 65 miles an hour, I think I'm at 2,800 RPM in my bus in the carbon cab. The tranny that I put in there is like a mega freeway flyer. Like it's super, super tall gear. So it's built specifically for like highway driving. Like the first time I took it on a trip after I finished it, I took it from Clovis, California to the Sacramento Bugarama, and I had 48s on it. I still have 48 IDAs on it, and driving with it. I've got a 2.6 liter Type 4, and driving from there to there, I was averaging like 10 miles a gallon because I was at like 4,200 RPM. So after that trip, I pulled the motor and trans, and I went to my training and I said, I want the tallest fourth gear that they make, tallest ring and pinion combo. So I think I'm like a 437 082, something like that, which is higher than a 388 089. And it doesn't go into fourth until you hit 60. And then it's just a cruiser. The fastest I've had that bus up to is like 110. And then the land speed record for super big block Type 2 is held by Steph Mueller in Australia. He had the kangaroo double cab. They used it for like hunting kangaroos, and he holds a land speed record in Australia at 119 mile an hour, and I think I can beat it in the crew cab. I think I can. I'm quite confident I can beat it. Plus, where he did it at sea level, he's like 2,500 above sea level, and where the salt flats are, it's like 5,400 feet over there. So thinner air, higher mile an hour. So we'll see. One of these days, I'm taking it up there and running it.
Yeah, we drove SüFunk from Huntington Beach to Boise in 16 hours, which is 900 miles.
Wow, that's nonstop.
Yeah, 16 hours straight. And we stopped in Bishop for lunch, and that was almost an hour.
Wow, you guys are hauling the mail, man. That's rad.
Yeah, I was passing everything on the road. And we were cruising at like 80. You know.
Oh yeah. No, that's rad, man. That's rad. Well, cool, Lynn. I appreciate it, man. And I'm gonna go ahead and get this. Like I said, I'll get it out tomorrow, and I'll send you a copy of it.
Awesome. Great talking with you.
Right,
and
hey, man.
we'll be in touch.
For sure. Have a good night.
All right.